Thank you for being here for this transmission on Scions. It is May 6th, 2020, a Wednesday morning. And here in Nowhere Village, that means that we dive deep into the themes that we're talking about and ask some big questions about life together. I have been talking about sources and scions here in Nowhere Village, and it's part of this bigger program we're doing called the Coordinates. And the Coordinates is a 9-part inquiry process, and so we're going through it one part at a time, and here we are. The first 2 parts are really related. And so the talk that I'm about to give is about scions, and when I use that word, I mean using the word to mean a descendant or a branch. My talk about descendants and branches and scions, I'm talking about our students, our children, our mentees, the beings who we help in this world. And when I talk about them, it turns out I have to also talk about sources, which was the deeper theme at the beginning of our inquiry journey. And because, of course, when we're learning how to relate to our scions, we're learning how to be good sources. And we learn that from studying our sources. And so I'll be talking a little bit about that today. I'll be talking a little bit about how to be a source for others, how to hold space, as I sometimes call it, as many people sometimes call it, how to be present with somebody else and with their needs in a way that is most supportive for them without being depleting for yourself. Everything that we're talking about is about relationships right now, really. Next week, I'll talk about friends. I'll talk about the relationships with beings that we have where we're at a level with somebody. They're a collaborator or they're a partner. And that kind of relationship has certain dynamics that we'll talk about next week. We'll talk a lot more next week also about just communication. Authentic communication is what I call it. But in the sources and scions relationship, whereas a friend's relationship is often, based on, at least at first, often based on pleasure, friendship, celebration, some of the lighter things in life, coming together around activities that we enjoy, playing together is what we do with our friends when we're little. But in our relationships with scions and sources, we bump up against something that is coming up in our founding members meeting on Monday when we do our check-in. Michael was talking about this, but it came up in other shares as well. This feeling that I don't want to be dependent on anybody, and I don't want anybody to be dependent on me. It feels like a trap, it doesn't feel like freedom. And I've been thinking about this because, of course, I think so many of us, I'm smiling because I think so many of us have had that kind of allergic reaction to being a part, to being interdependent, and to being a part of this bigger web because of what that means about our autonomy or our idea of freedom. But the fact of the matter is, we are all dependent. And there's lots of inquiries that you could do to kind of prove this to yourself, right? There's lots of explorations that you could do on your own to let yourself really kind of grok this, like get it and trust that it's true. But, for instance, if I took you off of this planet and tried to put you in another environment that didn't have the air that you needed and the right temperature that you needed and all of these unique circumstances that humans have co-evolved with the planet so that that works. If I plucked you out, you would then have to become dependent on a bunch of other things. You would have to become dependent on your spacesuit or, you know, whatever it is that you use to replace the care, basically, and protection of belonging to your source, the planet, and all that goes with it. And so this, you got it. There's a guy down the street who, you really get to know your neighbors in quarantine, you know, and all the sounds of the neighborhood. There's a guy down the street who something's wrong with his car, and to get it started, it takes like minutes of like, ooh, ooh. It's very loud. And so just every time I'm kind of rooting for him. My dad had cars like that growing up. I remember sometimes his kids like helping him push the car. I've seen that his kids do this too, like push it down the road until he can get it running, you know. It's funny that came up. Anyway, I'm going to talk about that next, or talk about childhood a little bit next. But anyway, okay, we are dependent, actually. You know, our bodies are, and our hearts and our emotional bodies are actually dependent on healthy relationships with other beings. You know, and we have needs, right? So, and I know, so for me in my own story, feeling like I had needs was scary, even from kind of a young age. Feeling like I had needs. That wasn't where I felt strong. I felt strongest when I didn't have needs, and I felt more independent. And I think that's okay. I think that's natural. But what happened is I started to have scions in my life, and that really shifted things for me. And our scions can become for us a reminder that having needs is not bad. What makes a baby adorable, right? Or a puppy. I mean, not just that they have needs, but you know what I mean? It's a part of that. We wouldn't ever ask a baby to just like get it together and get a job, you know? It's not the way that we relate. And so one of the many, 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 many gifts of scions is that they help us remember that we are scions too. They model for us how we want to relate to our sources. For me, in my own life, so last week I gave this talk, which I wasn't really proud of in the end. I know some of you said that you liked it. I didn't actually post it publicly, though the founders have access to it, because I've just basically, you guys get everything in that coordinates course, but and there's a little letter in there. I might do like a stripped down version of that I like an edited version or a written version that I've edited to give you. But I think the reason why I didn't like the talk myself was because I was sort of like working through some of my stuff and hadn't actually completely clarified it for myself. And I was sort of like working through it live with you guys, which is okay. It's not usually what I want to do in these talks, but for whatever reason I was called to, and that's what happened. But what I seem to be processing, and I've been thinking about this in this last week, why was that like this like thing that came out, even though that wasn't the talk I planned on giving? And I think what it is I'm reflecting a lot on my childhood, who my immediate sources were, my parents and my extended family and the community that I grew up in. And realizing that my original sources in different ways for different reasons, I didn't totally trust all my sources. And what I was talking about last week a bit is this feeling that I saw there being clashes among the adults, and I could see the kind of embattlement of some of the adults around me. I could basically see they didn't trust. I could feel their lack of trust. Yeah, there was a sort of war going on that I felt. When my brother was born, because I'm the oldest, when my brother was born, I was 3. I remember everything shifting for me. I mean, I don't really remember before I was 3, but I remember being a young kid and having this relationship with him that ended up feeling in some ways more, so our relationship with our sources should be about trust, right? They should bring us this big sense of trust. Like, I trust this planet to do what it does for me. Obviously, we got to take better care of it, but I trust it because it's big and it's strong and it's, But a lot of what was going on in my early childhood, I think I didn't find that deep sense of trust. And then I moved a lot, so I never had like a source of sort of like steady home. I was taken away from that extended family and that theater community. We created a new one eventually, but I think that I had a lot of experiences of, I don't know how this is going to go, right? And I'm not really in charge. But then I had a brother, and I remember getting in a lot of ways, actually, he seemed more consistent in a lot of ways than the adults. So there was, in some ways, I could trust him more. I couldn't trust him to like go get me groceries or something like the adults could, but I could trust him to be him. And I could trust, and from one day to the next to be similar. And I could trust him in the way that he treated me. And I could trust him. I could trust him for a lot of reasons, right? And suddenly I wasn't alone in this environment. I had somebody to kind of like figure it out with. But I think that what happened for me personally is that I started to at a very young age, find kind of like source bonds with beings who weren't able to meet all those needs. Like little orphan children. We weren't actually orphaned, but do you know what I mean? Like banding together is not quite the same as actually having these bigger sources of trust. But as I've been reflecting on this journey and why all this early childhood stuff is coming up for me, I have been feeling so inspired by children and the idea of children. And I think this is why. So, all right. I kind of meant to say this at the top of the talk, but we're just going to say it now. Here's why I do all of this, I think. Why I do the coordinates, why I've done all these teachings. I believe we are good. I believe we, as humans, innately inside have all of this goodness and care. Every single coordinate is supposed to kind of lead you back to your own love and your own connectedness. So many people come to me and they're like, I'm not spiritual. And I'm like, okay, let's toss that word. I don't care about that word. Don't be spiritual. But something in here, something in the process and in the practices and in the connecting to our sources and our vision and, something in that is free for you. And I want you to just be able to like find your way to that because I believe that we are told, I believe I was told by my immediate sources who were told by their sources, right? Told that you're probably actually not that good, right? You probably were born in sin or something, and you probably should fix yourself. You should probably do a better job, find somebody out there who's doing a better job and imitate them, pretend that basically you're doing that. And my parents weren't religious or anything. Actually, I made a big point of that last week. They're not religious at all. But what I mean is that there is this sort of just dogma in our culture. It's what I'm saying is it's in our culture. Whether or not you decide to be counterculture and be against that, right? Or you decide to, the fact of the matter is our culture is a source that's kind of broken. It's not kind of broken, it's broken. And so all of our parents have been influenced by that. And so that we've all been influenced by that. All of our teachers. Sorry, there's like two different directions my mind wants to go in at the same time. So I'm trying to figure out which door to go through first. But so culture is a source that creates us. And we've been living in a culture that's broken in a lot of ways. I've been reading a lot of antebellum South books. I don't know exactly why, and drawn toward just a lot of sort of literature and different nonfiction as well that I've been reading a lot of Audre Lorde. That was a source I didn't realize I needed. I feel very connected to her Black feminist thought, and I'm reading some about differently able-bodied people and how they function in this world, and looking a lot at how does a source, culture, a society end up getting to be such a shitty source, like such a bad source of love and wisdom and empowerment. And things obviously are different now than they were in the antebellum South. It's a really extreme example. But it's still the same culture. We still we live in our society is still on a continuum with slave culture. And the way that a lot of people are experiencing this economic crisis, obviously it's coming on the back of this health crisis. I don't feel like they're being cared for in the way that a source should care. I don't feel like our society is taking care of the scions well enough, of the ones who need the support. And I have a lot of anger about that. Sometimes I have a lot of grief about it. Sometimes I have these emotions come up, and that's good, right? I think as long as I have a healthy, safe context to process all of those emotions and work through it, and I'm not shoving it all inside, I think it's healthy that I have some challenging emotions about the way that a lot of people are experiencing their reality right now. And the power that some beings in this world have to actually stop that suffering or appease it. How do we get there? So how do you get a whole society of people who decide that it's okay to treat some of the population in a certain way, as if they're not human, as if they're not beings worthy of care? How do we get there? Well, if I start at the beginning and I look at my inspiration for Scions children, and I look at my little brother and me when we were little, I look at my nieces and my nephews, I look at all the children in the books that I've been reading who are growing up in these really dark periods of history. They're good. They're just good. They're good already. They get it already. They don't have all of the context and the understanding, and they haven't built wisdom in that way. But they have the most true basic wisdom of care. They get what matters. They get what they care about. And so they know how to actually bond and love and connect. As I was speaking about some last week, I felt that the counterculture I grew up with was at war with the rest of the world. It was scary. Now that I can reflect on it in this way, it was scary to kind of be hearing these things. It was also kind of true, you know, but I remember kind of, yeah, this feeling of sort of embattlement. And then within the ranks, there was this, again, this feeling of clashing. My parents ended up getting divorced, but I felt that tension the whole time. So I've been thinking about this, what effect this has on children. Bye, Sveta, thank you. All over the world, all throughout time. If you see that clash, I'll just say for me, when I reflect on it now, an impossible contradiction started to be born in me. An inner division started to be born in me as I saw the adults around me at war with each other and with others. And as I saw them at war with themselves. These dichotomies in our culture, masculine, feminine, right? My inner masculine and feminine in so many ways has been at war my whole life. Between intuition and logic. I felt that tension really strongly because we were an artistic family, but then a lot of the people in my family were scientists, and everyone was very sort of anti, superstition and mumbo jumbo. Right? These divides, I remember at a very young age being like, I'm gonna get screwed over here somewhere. I'm gonna end up on the wrong side of the line, and there's no way to win. And so how many children throughout time all over the world who already have this goodness, they already know what's valuable, they already know how to care, it's already built into them. How many learn? War. How many learn that love and truth actually don't go together? They're opposites. And then as soon as the inner state is at war, you don't have inner trust. And then you're in a state of being desperate for trust. And so then we're going around looking for our sources, not in a way that feels like strong and empowered. This is a good source for me. Yes, I'm having a relationship with this source. We go desperate, looking for somebody to bring us back to peace, because war isn't a place we can live. We're desperate to find trust because there's been a kind of vacuum of trust, because we saw these contradictory things. A child growing up, I mean, yeah, in the end of all himself, it's like, how can you be broken? How can that inner state, that like feeling that all beings should be cared for, everyone around me deserves trust and respect, as soon as I see some other little kid, even if they have a different color skin, as soon as I see some other little kid being treated badly, some part of me becomes terrified that's going to happen to me. And then we go around the world soaked in fear. We're going to talk really deeply about fear in a couple weeks, but it comes up in all the coordinates, because the fear is, of course, what we feel when we're out of alignment, or we're in danger of being out of alignment with a coordinate. And so I said I'd talk about how we can be sources for others. And to do that, I'm going to share a little bit about my discoveries with my sources. So what I have come to realize is that, by trying to get back to my inner goodness, my inner care, my inner wisdom, I have come to realize that this story that I learned very young, that we are actually broken, that we are always going to be in battle, that there are going to be these opposites. Classic one, good and evil. Oof, that one's a doozy. That these things are always going to be at war, and that's actually the reality that we're going to have to live in. That once I pulled in that story, it created all this suffering for a lifetime. There's different kinds of experiences we can have, right? There's like different kinds of conditioning, right? We all have conditioning. There's natural conditioning, which is like if a bear knocked on the window, or you would see me probably flee, right? I wouldn't stop the video. I would bow. That would be just by nature responding. And then there's sort of things that we're more conscious of. I can consciously control. I could choose to look down at this paper. I could pick it up. I can, And then there's something in between, though. The nurture and the nature and the nurture. There's something in between where we get indoctrinated so early, or we're in some kind of fear state. There's different ways, but basically where that conditioning is so deep that it feels like nature. And that's really kind of this like powerful place to work, which we are working here, right? With our different inquiry practices and the way that we work. But what I realized is that like a lot of my suffering, my personal life was caused by sort of early experiences where I believed that the conditions I was in were a natural state. And what I'm realizing now is actually there's some wiggle room in there. I can rediscover some of these old stories, and I could shift at that level so that I'm not actually stuck in this conditioning. But for me, realizing that part of that conditioning is my sources are at war. My sources are in opposition. It's an impossible situation for a scion to be in. If you want mom to win, you lose dad. If you want dad to win, you lose mom. Nobody wins. But the truth always wins. Satyam eva jayate. It's one of my favorite Sanskrit phrases. And so this is where I've been working. Is I realized that for me, what are my sources? My parents are truth and love. Yin and yang. Divine masculine, divine feminine, intuition and logic. I am a blend of them both. And so to outcast one is to outcast a half of myself. I won't do it. I'm not doing it anymore. In Buddhism, there's this concept of that compassion and wisdom are the two wings of the bird. And they go together. If there's not enough compassion, it's probably also not enough wisdom. If there's not enough wisdom, it's probably not enough compassion. They go together. This teaching is really big for me. It's really resonating very deeply for me especially as I own those two concepts of love and truth, and the idea that they go together. When I was a little kid, I was sort of like, I guess love and truth don't go together. I'm gonna have to choose one. It's a tough choice. It's especially tough when you can't have one without the other. Like we were talking a couple weeks ago with the yin and the yang symbol. They include each other. And so when I want to be a source for others, I go back to who my sources are, right? If my parents are love and truth, our family tree ultimately goes back to the Tao or reality, the wholeness, right? Around that Tao, that yin and yang symbol, the all, the one. My source of this planet is a really, 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 really important source. And so what I've been doing is trying to look to my sources, my eternal sources. Nitya. Nitya means eternal. These eternal sources. And what I want to do now is be a channel for those sources. I want to measure the way that I hold myself in the world by those two. I see them as the hallmark of every love and truth, as the hallmark of everything good around us. And when I look to the way that love shows up in all of its diversity, the planet shows up in all of its diversities, all these different flavors, there's all these different colors. There's all these different beautiful sounds, you know. When I look at that, that makes me want to sit in a way that allows for diversity in my community and in my students and in the way that I relate, right? When I look around to my sources and I see how accepting they are, how they're not into control, they're into abundance and offering and freedom. I try to model that. The control piece is really, really, really huge. I talk about this a lot because it's so important. When I am trying to hold space for other beings, when I am trying to be a source for them, I try to just remember that I'm a channel for my sources. Love and truth are your parents too, right? We're siblings. I'm not like sharing my parents with you because you, poor thing, don't have any. They're shared by all. And none of us as scions control our sources. This culture sure is trying to control the gifts of Mother Earth, right? Or some parts of it. You know, I want to be a model for that way of being a source. What's this? The Tao is called the Great Mother, empty yet inexhaustible. It gives birth to infinite worlds. It is present within you. You can use it any way you want. So this sense that our sources give and give and give to us, and also give us this extra thing of the freedom to figure it out for ourselves, of the freedom to fuck it all up and then learn and get back up and try again. The freedom to suffer and to be broken and to be at war and then heal ourselves and come back to peace. I was desperate to find trust in this world, to find belonging in this world, to find home in this world, to find peace in this world, to find purpose in this world. And in reflecting for myself in this round of the coordinates, reflecting for myself on my sources and my scions, I've come to really appreciate this very beautiful journey that I've been on. And my scions have been really, really important to me along the way. And for whatever reason, maybe it's because I had an audience when I was very little. I was an actor and I got used to kind of that kind of interacting with scions. Maybe because I was a big sister and that was a huge part of my identity. There's probably lots and lots of reasons why. But Scions for me have woken up my sense of self-worth and purpose. They've given me a reason to etra, a reason to be. They have shown me that it's okay to have needs and ask for help. They've shown me that we are all capable of growth and learning, right? A Scion is also a student, one ready to be guided, one who understands I'm not in charge. I want to get something out of this by not being in charge, by being along for the ride, by being available to be transformed and tutored. And my Scions have taught me how to be a source. My Scions have taught me what's important, because getting back to what I said before, we're all good. We all have the hookup to care and to love. But for me, what gets me out of my ego more than anything else is actually somebody else who needs me. Oof. And that ego is a drag, man. You know? But what I'm learning is I also have some work to do around being able to feel my worth and value and purpose without having to have that audience there all the time, at least, present. I'm learning myself actually how to be a Scion, I'm realizing, to my sources, to really let them hold me and to really trust that they are moving through me. Anything good that comes out of my mouth or through my hand came from them. And when I can reconnect with that, then suddenly I'm not depleting myself when I offer. I'm getting the flow. It's flowing through me on the way to you. I'm just calling it into the room. We all get to hang out with truth and love. Our parents. Bye, Holly. Yeah, I know I need to wrap it up. People are leaving. Yeah, so I will. I'm going to wrap it up. But yeah, that's it. I think that's good. The last thing I'll say is just, I believe in our goodness. I believe that we are all actually made of love and truth, because we are made of reality, the Tao, the source, who offers all things to us and through us. Thank you so much. If anybody has any questions that you want to write in, you can. Or you can come on if you want.